Today we're gonna make some black pepper beef. So let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna prep this little marinade. And as is custom with a lot of Chinese cooking, we're gonna have some baking soda. This is gonna really help to tenderize that meat. So we've got just a little bit of baking soda there. We're gonna go in with some soy sauce. We've got a little bit of neutral oil here. Now we're going in with some black pepper, a little pinch of salt, some sesame oil, some white pepper, and then some cornstarch. This is gonna help thicken this up a little bit. Now let's give this a little whisk. Now I'm gonna be cooking with a flat iron steak. You can use a ribeye, a sirloin, anything you want. For the money, I think this is as good as it gets. We're cutting this into thin strips. You don't want anything too expensive in my opinion, but do whatever you like. This is a good recipe to clean out the freezer if you have something that you stuck in the freezer a while back and you want to use that up. But I love a good flat iron steak. For the money, it's as good as it gets. And you can see with a piece of meat like this, you can see the grain is running really long ways with it. And you always want to cut this against the grain. And I'm going into little, about 1/4 inch strips here. That's a little bit bigger, but I want to start with it right. I'm kind of cutting it on an angle, on a bias, if you will. And like I said, right before I pull this out, I put it in the freezer for just a few minutes. That helps keep it nice and cold and keep it together while we're cutting it. If you have this at room temperature, it's going to be harder to slice, but a good knife like this doesn't really have to have that. This is a good sharp knife, but I like to throw it in the freezer for just a few minutes. That goes for slicing anything like this. If I'm doing a Philly cheesesteak or anything like that, I'll do the same thing. All right, now I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna put it right in there, and I'm gonna mix it up really good. We're gonna let this go for 20 to 30 minutes if we can. That's gonna give that baking soda some time, the time it needs to do its job of really tenderizing the proteins within this. It's gonna add a little bit of flavor too, of course, but you really want this to be a nice tender cut of steak once it's finished cooking, and this helps do that job really well. Once this is covered really well, we're gonna put it in the fridge for about 20 minutes. All right, so in this instance, we've got a yellow onion, a red bell pepper, and some garlic. These are the vegetables I like with this dish. You could obviously change this up a bit if you'd like to. And I'm going with a pretty coarse chop on all this. Nothing too crazy. I'm gonna take my bell pepper here and just cut the core out of it. I'm looking for a real rough chop here. Nothing too small. I like a little bit of a bite to this. Nothing too fine here. It's good enough for me there. Same thing with our onion. Just gonna cut it 2 times. Something like that is what I'm looking for personally. You can go smaller if that's what you like, but this is what I'm looking for. Now we've got 4 cloves of garlic here, and I'm giving this a really rough chop. I'm just gonna go in and cut little slices. We're not doing a fine mince for this. And that's it. That's all I'm doing for these aromatics here. You could add more to this if you want to, but this is how I like it. So we're gonna set that aside. Now we're gonna work on the sauce. All right, so we've got the ingredients for this sauce here. We're gonna start with our soy sauce. We've got a few tablespoons of that here. If you have it, do 1 tablespoon of light and 1 tablespoon of dark soy sauce. It gives you a little bit more contrast there. Now we're gonna go in with about the same amount of oyster sauce. Now we've got some cooking wine, black pepper, just a pinch of sugar, some beef stock, about 1/2 cup of beef stock, and then our cornstarch. This is gonna help thicken this sauce up again. Give this a really good mix. You wanna make sure all that cornstarch is well mixed into this. You don't want any big clumps of that, so stir this up really well, and we're gonna set this to the side and get our steak ready to start cooking it. All right, so we're gonna be cooking this in a wok, and this is all gonna happen pretty quick. You could definitely do it in a pot if you didn't have a wok, but it's definitely a better method of cooking this. I've got about, I don't know, 2 or 3 tablespoons of a neutral oil. So I'm using a vegetable oil. You could use a canola, an avocado oil, anything like that would work. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna cook this. It's only gonna take about 2 minutes. Cooking it really hot and fast. So we're gonna remove it. We're gonna add in our onions, peppers, and garlic. Start cooking that. As soon as it starts to soften up a bit, we're gonna add everything back together with this sauce. Let it start to thicken up and come together. And this is all done very quickly. We're just gonna go straight in with this. I'm gonna spread it out. Now the beef is not completely room temperature, so it's gonna cool down that oil pretty good. We're gonna let this come back up to temp and try not to move it around too much. I just wanna cover up as much surface area as you can. Keep that heat high. Make sure every side gets cooked. But this whole process only takes about 2 minutes. If it starts to get really hot on you, you can pull it away from the heat. And honestly, this beef is probably right where we want it. This is really thin, so you don't want to overcook it. We're just gonna remove it. I've got a paper plate here with some paper towels over it. You kind of pull it off that heat a little bit. Let it cool off just a bit before we throw these vegetables on there. Now we're gonna go in with these veggies and let these cook down for a few minutes before adding our sauce. Just kind of keep it moving, and you don't want any of this garlic to burn. That's the only thing I'm kind of looking for here. A few minutes here and these will be kind of tender, and then we're gonna start adding in this sauce, and I'll turn the heat down at that point. So I'm gonna turn this heat down to a medium heat now, let this come down just a little bit before we add in this sauce. I don't want it to tighten up too quickly, but as soon as this kind of cools off a bit, we're gonna add our beef back and then this sauce, and then it's just a minute or two to let that sauce thicken up, and we'll be ready to plate. Now this is smelling amazing, and this has cooled off a bit, so it's time to add in our beef. Let's give this a good mix, get everything well combined. Now let's add in this sauce. Instantly you can hear it cools things down a little bit, so we're gonna let it come back up to heat. As soon as this thing is the thickness we want, we're done. You can already see this is starting to thicken up. It's only been about 30 seconds. We're getting a much thicker sauce. It's probably about halfway there. This smells so good. So personally, I like eating this over some white rice. So I'm just gonna take it and pour it right over that. And this is gonna be so good. Gonna finish it with some more of that black pepper. Let's see what we got here. Well, it's so good. Oh my gosh, that beef is so tender. I could eat so much of this. The full recipe can be found at crowfood.com, along with our rubs, merchandise, and dozens of other great recipes. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and as always, thanks for watching.